Alrighty. Looks like everything is working and we are back. Hooray. Oh sevens, everyone. Welcome to episode 107 of the Pathfinders podcast. I am Tree0311, your host and producer for the podcast. Not being joined by Nazareth this evening. Nazareth works most Saturday nights, and so I'm hoping, fingers crossed. What is with these damn headphones? I hope these things aren't going out. I'm hoping that my wife will allow us or allow me to do more episodes in the future on Sunday afternoon. When Naz is usually off and my kids are usually napping, so that way we can do it more often or do the podcast more often together because it's just more fun. I enjoy it, and I enjoy having him around and enjoy chatting with him. And God, this one.
All right. Those new planets and biomes were pretty, right? But it's time for phase-free civilization.
What the hell? Oh, my headphones did that. I was tapping on them. Whoopsie. Sorry. For some reason, I'm getting like weird static coming through this left ear, and it just started, and I don't know what's going on. I really don't want to buy another set of headphones, but it's really freaking annoying. It takes like, it hangs out for a few minutes and then slowly goes away, but it's like, what is going on? But yeah, so welcome to the Pathfinders podcast, where we're charting the way through all the nebulous information surrounding Star Citizen Squadron 42 and their development. And this evening, we've got a couple of segments. First one is going to be kind of brief. It's just looking at the Roadmap Roundup from Wednesday, the 15th. But then we're going to be getting into a Spectrum Pulse. We're going to be watching a few clips from recent years, listening to what CIG has to say, and talking about it in the greater context of how CIG is going to be changing how we traverse the verse in terms of quantum travel in the not terribly distant future, and why, what that means for the game, and why they're doing it. So it's something I've been looking forward to. The whole idea of what the community's always been saying. If everything's long range, then nothing is. Well, this is how we're going to get there. Danger Hobo, my Prince of Dragons, Stepsis, what's going on? How you guys doing? Thanks for stopping by. Hope you're all doing well. Appreciate your support. God, this is gonna drive me nuts. I really don't want to buy a new set of headphones. These are only like a year or two old, and they're Beats. I'll have to play around with them and see if it's just something like that's going on in this room, or because last night it did it while I was playing Star Citizen. I wonder if I... No, that's not it. I just have to suck it up. Before we get into the Roadmap Roundup, though, I wanted to show you guys a little something. I shared it already in my Discord, but I want to show you guys as well. I'm excited about. Give me 1 second. Pull them both up. Oops. Alrighty, let's go ahead and switch screens so you guys can see what I'm seeing. Okay. All right, so this is the first color work in progress for the logo for my org that I've founded, called the Scavengers Union. Oh, feel like it's almost done. It's trying to fix itself. So yeah, the theme being, carrion feeders, opportunistic predators and scavengers and such. If you want to learn more about it, you can hop in my Discord. And there's a welcome page for the org, as well as hold on, let me just pull up the link to it. I'll drop that in the chat. I still have to finish filling out the org page, but it's been fun. We've had a bunch of little group sessions, calling them Scavengers Union operations that I do on stream. And we've been doing some salvaging, going out and doing missions, disabling ships, and scavenging them. Mount Center, I love that it's a Drake ship getting scavenged. Yeah, I thought it would be a great ship for showing off the aesthetic, as well as like breaking apart and a container being pulled out. Obviously, it's not you know exactly accurate because it looks like a 32 SCU container, which wouldn't fit in a caterpillar, but big enough that you can see it in the beak of the crow. And then the paint scheme on the caterpillar was meant to sort of resemble the pirate caterpillar um, that you get from doing Pirate Swarm, or yeah, in Arena Commander. So this is the first first draft color version that the artist, that same artist that did the Vomit Comet, as well as the Luke Goblin logos for me. And then this is the same, but in black with updated lighting on the crow itself, a few more stars. Um, and Sepsis says, sent the other org thing the other day. When you did? Oh, zero. Oh, okay. I will have to hop on the website and check it out. And Stepsis, did you go in the welcome channel in the Discord and get approved and click the button to accept the role as Crow? Because that'll give you access to the other channels and such. Um, so I'm going back and forth about whether I like the black versus the blue. Let's see if the black background versus the blue background. Um, this looks more like it's got some blue on the wings, whereas this looks more gray, which I think I like better, even if I do the blue background. But I think what I'm gonna do, what I might go with, and I've asked them to do it, is expand the ring to encompass the whole thing. Maybe add some more stars or something like that. And then that way it'll fit in a circular patch with being able to put Scavengers Union, the words in the sort of pendant banner things, top and bottom, like I have for the Vomit Comet, which this is Vomit Comet Relic Expeditions. This is the first collectible patch I made, and so I'm going to have more made for the Loot Goblin, but then also have them made for the Scavengers Union. So what you'd see on the screen is what would fit within the circle here, and then the words above it, Scavengers Union. So that's the goal. Sepsis, remind me later, and I will show you in the Discord where to click the button to get the role. But it's in the Discord channels. There's under the category Star Citizen, there's another category called Scavengers Union with a channel that says Welcome Aboard. You click on that one, and you can read through the description, and then just click the button to get the role, the little heart icon. Okay, let's see, where was I? G-Cube says, apparently I'm an Anvil man. Love the designs of many other ships, Drake, Gray, Argo, but the Asgard and the Super Hornet just fit my gameplay so much better. Oh, yeah. I love the Asgard. I mean, the Valkyrie will always be my first love, but I love the Asgard just for the the utility and versatility of it right now. Yeah, I think the black looks better too. Um, and I like this star, the sort of many pointed star versus these little ones, but I like having a few more stars rather than just three. And I think if the circle is bigger, maybe have some more stars, maybe some bigger ones. I was also thinking like maybe if the circle goes all the way out to here, maybe over here, like there's a ringed planet or something. I don't know. Just a little bit more flavor to it. Mount Son of the Org isn't old. It is a very new old. It is I'm RPing it, and that is the impetus of how my main character and my Zero to Hero character actually met. My Zero to Hero actually being a member of the org, which I actually need to do. Um, and them meeting and what the circumstances of that is what got my main character to form the org. Um, yeah, I think the black does do better in terms of contrast against with the bird. And I like the gray and but the I feel like the black also is better representative of like this being the black of space. Um, because like that's the whole idea is living out in the black and working together to survive out in the black, where resources are scarce and the it's dangerous and such. Whereas blue, it doesn't look spacey enough to me. G Cube says gonna meet Astro someday in the blue. Are you talking about Astro Pub? Alberto Martinez says the darker one is better. Yeah, I'm leaning towards that as well. And I like how he changed the lighting. You can see the caterpillar is much brighter on this one on the left than the one on the right. Um, but I feel like you can see the detail on the in terms of the feathers and stuff with the gray versus the blue. And it matches, dark, gray along with black and red, those being more like the themes. Yeah, blue looks like the sky on the world. G Cube, yeah, his sign up. Yeah, gonna meet Astro someday in the blue. Yep, yep. But yeah, so that's the work in progress for the logo. I'll keep you guys updated every stream as that comes along. I'm hoping tomorrow afternoon I'll have a few hours to just sit down and finish writing out the lore stuff for it on the org page, and then once this is done, I'll update the. We'll pull that over here real quick. I'll put the logo here. Um, so the history I have it all outlined in my head and everything, so I need to write that out. But I've got the manifesto on there and the charter. And so it's been pretty fun just getting it going. And it's just a super fun, casual way to just group up with people and go do some gameplay, themed around like lots of looting and scavenging, salvaging, and surviving out in the verse rather than, oh, I'm just going to grind a bunch of UEC and then go buy everything in shops. Um, so yeah, but let's go ahead. Yeah, thanks, man. I appreciate it, Mount Center. Yeah, it goes by Fizzle Fuse in game and I think in Discord as well, and I think that's his name on Twitter and stuff. But um, yeah, Fizzle Fuse. Here, I'll pull up the other ones for you. So if you guys haven't seen them, you probably all have, but just to be safe, I really like their style. Let's see. There's the Loot Goblin. And then there's the original Vomit Comet. Oh, here we go. Okay. All right. We're doing this live. I'm gonna show you the ones that he just sent me. All right, and you guys can tell me what you think live. All right, so this is what we just looked at. Let's see. And then there's the blue. All right, and so here's the black in sort of a horizontal, like if I wanted to do a horizontal patch or a rectangular patch. Here's one on a triangular, what would be like a triangular patch. I kind of like this. I think this is pretty slick. The only thing I might have them do is make it so that way the tail feathers are a little bit more visible. There's the blue in a blue circle, and here's in a black patch. I feel like you lose the details of the bird in the black one a little bit. It's not yellow, it's more of a gold, but it's the let's see. I'm gonna pull up the this is the pirate caterpillar. So it's like a goldish, almost bronzy. Okay, so let's see. They say everything within the circle becomes tiny because of the shape wingspan of the bird. It's a very horizontal drawing, so it would scale down a lot to fit inside a circle. Here's an example, in my opinion. There's just too much empty space above and below. With the wings overlapping, it really pops the bird out. You could also go for a triangle or a rectangle also attached, but honestly, I also don't really like those. You just end up with it getting a bit lost in the image. Oh, also, I removed the border because I didn't immediately fit on my canvas. Just trying out shapes to see what you think. As for the lighting change, it's very minute. I desaturated the blue because an indirect light blue light didn't make much sense with the background being black. Okay, so that one's got that sort of blue. Or is it not? Hmm. I'm kind of liking that one, but I also like I don't know. What do you guys think? I think this one's my favorite now. The problem is I don't know how well that would be able to be made into a patch with those small corners. All Drake shapes turn a rusty yellow gross color. So yeah, maybe I'll start a poll in the Discord and everything and see what people think. Yeah, I do kind of like the black square or the black rectangle, but I know I'm gonna have to look around at it because black rec. What? Nope. Nope, not that. Let's do a side by side. Hmm. I think they're both pretty cool. Yeah, I feel like it really helps show the outline of the wings, you know, either being transparent or but just being outside of it versus being on all black. I feel like you do lose a lot at the wing tips. Not as much down here, but um one is a patch, one is a poster. Yeah, I think this one's my favorite too. So far, that's my favorite. But yeah, let's go ahead and get into the show, and we'll take a look at at the roadmap roundup. Obviously, there's not a lot for this last week. The bigger one was when we got the first one for 10, um, which again we got to remind everybody 410 is only next month. So we're probably 4 weeks out from 410. Steps says both look mean. I like them. Yeah, me too. I'm definitely a fan. I really like what he did with the idea. So, Roadmap Roundup. Hello, everyone. Every 2 weeks, we accompany the roadmap update with a brief explanatory note to give you insight into the decision making that led to any changes. This is part of an effort to make our communications more transparent, more specific, and more insightful for all of you who helped to make Star Citizen and Squadron 42 possible. Just for a reminder, the 1.0 column showcases features and content planned for inclusion in or before Star Citizen 1.0. This means you may not have to wait for the 1.0 release to experience them. As features content in the 1.0 column become ready, they will migrate left into a point patch column for release, like instancing. Be sure to check back every 2 weeks for the latest updates. With that, let's dive into this week's Roadmap Roundup CIG community team. Notable changes for July 15th on the release view. F4.9, the following cards have been set to release. The Support the Miners mission pack was doing those last night with a couple of members of the org. High Prince of Dragon and Haru the Ninja were both hanging out with me, and we were grinding the ship and distress missions for rep and doing a whole bunch of looting, so that was a good time. Riding around in the Carrying Crow, which is my Idris that I use for the org, and then jumping between missions, and then going from the Crow, launching on CX's baby's first dropship to go and do the missions. Definitely want to try some of the minor scanning type missions, as well as doing some actual mining to start getting some resources stockpiled for some future crafting. Combat clothing, so they got that first bit of combat clothing with those suits that have some armor protection on them. A couple new hairstyles. The ordnance cargo holder, so bombs and missiles now have, when you hover them, have them in a tractor beam, and then hover them over a cargo grid, it will spawn the UI for the sort of storage frame around it, and then when you drop it onto the grid, the storage, the frame will materialize, and so it makes it a lot easier to see the bounding boxes the uh, of the ordnance themselves, and stack them neatly. And you can also rotate them so they stand on their tails. Hey, Shampasta07, good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you're doing well. Um, so those look really cool. I am confident that we are not far away, and I'm hoping I'm not wrong. I hope I'm not going to have to eat crow. But I am confident that we are not far away from being able to, like, say, um, either being able to load them into like an 8 or 16 SCU crate, depending on the size. You can only put a backpack into a 2 SCU crate. You can't put it into a 1 SCU crate due to the volume. We'll be able to do something like that for missiles of varying sizes, and or being able to stack them how you want and then like use the tractor beam to right click the stack, or some keybind, or maybe it's an interact, and you lock them into place. This stack of 12, this stack of 16, what have you, and then move them as a stack within reason based off of what kind of tractor beam you're using. Because that would make it so much easier to, okay, you stack them once, you move the stack, and then you unlock it in order to be able to reload them and everything versus having to constantly root back and forth, back and forth, back and forth each individual missile, when loading them. The Bearing CQ7 bullpup rifle. I was hoping, I don't want to buy one because that's not my not my jam in game right now, with being the first crow of the Scavengers Union. Stack up my torps, yeah. Um, but I haven't seen one in the loot tables yet, and so I'm hoping I'll come across one as I get further into the missions for um, Recco Battaglia, or Battaglia, depending on if you're Italian, you pronounce the G or not. Um, uh, but if I don't get one on, like, say, those missions where you have to board the moraine stations and such, maybe I'll find them in the loot at Vandal Tech Smugglers or something like that. The ship combat UI improvements, where the you get the different hit markers when you hit based off of whether you hit shields or penetrated shields, ricocheted off armor, penetrated armor, hit a component, and so on. Um, and you know what? Don't use, I don't, did they pull the audio all together after they got the final audio in there? Because I know it wasn't working right in the first place. I don't remember now that I think about it. Juvenile and adult Valakar behavior updates. So they've got more behaviors. They move around, they burrow and such. Um, it seems to be hit or miss how well it works and how unpredictable it is, but it's definitely a whole lot better than them just popping up and staying in one place and just getting shot. And how they react to what you're doing and moving away. I've yet to hear the casino bling sounds. Yeah, the ones that they were playing were not the ones that they wanted. And so I don't know if they just got rid of the sounds altogether. Because I think it's like, depending on what the final sounds actually sound like, having them in, some people might want the feedback. It's not for me, but I can totally understand people wanting the feedback. But being able to turn that off, you can, um, you know, turn off things in the UI that you don't want. How come you can't, the VFX of UI, but what about the auto effects? Um, so yeah, we'll see if they just scrap the idea altogether or bring it back at some point. I don't know. The flyby audio, again, that's not for every ship, but they'll be adding more ships, just like some ships actually just got, if you watch some of the shadow patch note, if you watch the 5 stars shadow patch notes or Mr. Kraken's shadow notes, um, they talk about which ships just got lamp or got lamp fixed, which is great. And it sounds like they're going to be doing the same thing with the flyby audio. To me, it sounds good. It's definitely nice to have it back. It just, it needs a little bit of polish, but it is what it is. Sepsis Enjoyer says the reticle in turrets before I get in the precision mode is way too big. It looks hideous. Huh. You can always add a crane for iron sights, yeah. Like on the Gray's Market Basher. It's that aesthetic is not for me, but I think they did a good job with it. I like, it's compared to the Shiv, it's much more subtle where they got the pieces from. It looks more new, and much more kit bashed than the Shiv. So it's a neat looking little ship, and it is really tiny. I wasn't not expecting it to be that tiny. The Ninetales armor update is in there. I haven't, but I don't know if I just haven't seen it because of the NPC spawning naked um, in some of the like stand locations like bunkers. But I've been playing in Nyx mostly, so looks glued together. Yeah, flying rust bucket. I feel like maybe they learned from the wolf and made it optional from the start. Oh yeah, the crane thing. Yep. Hmm. I don't know. I don't sit in turrets very often, so I can't picture what you're talking about regarding the turret UI thing. And then Battaglia's Alliance ships. So this is interesting. A lot of people are sleeping on this because this is the first. Um, in terms of rep and having that award ships or items to you. So they're trying out a new thing, and it'll be interesting to see where else they go with it. Um, all mining ships, but we'll see if anything else gets added from other mission givers. And I wonder who our next mission giver is going to be. I think it's the same in ships when you get in the gun mode. Hmm. Does yours look that big when you're flying the ship? Alpha 4.10. So the new lever action rifle is coming to 4.10 with an optic that comes with it. Um, it is not my speed. It looks uh, fancy. It looks like almost like if Origin made a gun to me. Um, and that's not my style. It doesn't look really tactical military enough. I love lever actions. I should have got it out. My gun cabinet right over there has my lever action, which was my, passed down to me via from, it was my great grandfather's, then my grandfather, then my uncle, and then now it's mine. Um, but mine is a model 1894 Winchester in 2535, but it was manufactured in 1902, and it's got a hand carved stock that my great grandfather carved. He was a gunsmith back there in the Depression, and it, it's a real tack driver. I had it fully restored, and it's a super cool gun. I'll have to get it out and show it off on stream one of these days. But this doesn't look space western enough to me. Yeah, space version of a 4570 if you're rich. It doesn't look like something that would belong in Nyx. It's just a too clean and round, almost sort of rounded off soft edges for me. But it's still cool. I want to see the animations. I haven't seen any leaks from. Maybe they are leaks from 4.10 tech preview that have it in there with people shooting it, but I haven't seen them yet. But yeah, that is it for the July 15th Roadmap Roundup. So right now for 4.10, I just want to pull that up real quick. So here's 4.9, here's 4.10. We're going to actually get physicalized Recca Battaglia. She's going to be instanced. And then the super heavy armor and its gun are coming. Core-Tech instancing and the item recovery ship loadout improvements. And it seems like we've got like almost like part of this in for 4.9. There is a video of it in my link channel. Okay, cool. I just haven't seen it yet. I don't know about you guys, but when I loaded into 4.9, all my ships that I had pulled out in 4.8 were shown as unknown, and I had to claim them. But if I claimed them and I did the insured claim versus the default or whatever it was, it claimed them with the loadout that I had last saved, which, I didn't have a lot of changes, but I had a handful of ships with upgraded components and stuff. And so far, I'm 100%. I didn't lose anything. Um, the only thing we, need in addition to this, is like, okay, well, we're going forward a patch. Well, I've got my Idris loaded. I had probably hundreds of thousands of credits, if not more, of supplies on the Idris, on the cargo grid up above, that I lost. And it's like, we shouldn't, and I stored the ship beforehand, and yeah, same here. Even the scavenge things were on the ship. Yep. Um, but I lost all those RRR supplies and everything, and anything, and it's like, well, if it was on a cargo grid or it was equipped, you shouldn't lose it. Not just if it was in an item port. So hopefully that'll be coming soon. Right now, this one says implementing item recovery ship loadout improvements, updating ship and item recovery to better support custom loadouts through time claims, optional expedite fees, freight elevator item claims, and debuting a free recovery option when losses are detected as outside the player's control. That's the biggest part for me that I'm really looking forward to, because shit just happens. Then all of a sudden your ship status is unknown and you have to claim it. Um, and like I've done that several times and paid a freaking mint. Oh man. And so like hopefully it'll be reliable. Um, but this is just ship loadout, and like we can already do item claims on the freight elevator, so I don't know why that part's in there. Um, but when are we doing this for FPS items? So we can get back subscriber stuff and other account bound things. 410 also has Siege of Orison instance coming back. And then we're going to be talking more about the fuel tanks and consumption rebalance that was pushed from 4.9 to 4.10. Very excited for that. More Wicklow ships, that Vendetta, and of course the liver action. So we probably have one more roadmap roundup for 410 where things will get added before they sort of lock it in while it's in PTU. Towards the end of this month, beginning of next month. So we'll see if what else gets added. But then we've only got a month till 410, and we already know that they're targeting 411 in September for Starware. So it'll be really interesting to see what else they get. They're targeting for 411 for besides Starware. Let's see. All right, but that is it for the July 15th Roadmap Roundup. I'm going to go ahead and switch screens real quick just so I have a nice, easy timestamp for me to find before we move into the Spectrum Pulse. Sorry, I was closing the tabs from the Roadmap Roundup. Make it a little bit easier for me to follow. God, I really need to see if I can get some repair parts sent out for my chair, so that way it stops sinking. I've only had this chair a year, but it's a refurbished Herman Miller, and it's been doing this for a couple months, and I just keep forgetting to look into it, along with looking into putting in a chat command for my Discord that North End Trooper, my mod, is supposed to remind me about outside of the podcast. Liver action rifle is what has me excited for 410. For me, it's the fuel balance stuff, and you're going to find out why. Let's go ahead. And this is going to be a shorter podcast because we had that short roadmap roundup and then just the one Spectrum Pulse. I'm probably going to go on a few tangents and everything, but I think you guys are going to enjoy this information. And it's something that I think we should all be excited for. Listen here, you little... All right, so the Spectrum Pulse this evening is titled Star Citizens Travel Challenge. Um, so right now, you guys know that you get a lot of missions and content that has you traveling a lot, and you spend a lot of time um, flying around, in space, and like especially in places like Nyx where there aren't any planets, but even in the other systems, there's a lot of missions where you do one, if you're grinding reputation for an organization, you'll do one mission for them in one place, and then I'll pick another one, and you'll have to quantum, halfway across the system or more to do the next mission. And so each, in between each contract, in between each mission, you're spending a lot of time just getting to the content. And eventually, and we're going to talk more about it, but eventually there's going to be more to do, and doing things in quantum is going to be more reliable. But there'll be gameplay, regarding quantum travel. But that's what we're doing right now in that regard is not the intent. It's not what CIG is going for. And I failed you guys in that I was not able to find the original quote. So if you guys remember it or come across it or something like that, let me know. But um, at what point, not long ago, not terribly long ago, or maybe it was a little bit longer ago and I'm just misremembering, but they talked about the goal being that yeah, I'm socially confused as I'm hesitant to move around in my shipping QT. I don't mind moving around, but you better not pick up a box and move it around. You better not, even going in ship elevators, which thankfully those are getting converted to transport from transit right now. Um, but like, the only time I've fallen out is when I've gone down an elevator or gotten into and out of a turret. Um, yeah, in a ship. And it's just because you're going through a transition, and the way quantum travel works now is not very compatible with that. The way quantum travel will work in the future, that it should resolve that issue. I always seem to find a hole. Yeah. Um, but so what we have right now with spending a lot of time in quantum travel, just bouncing around the system, is not the intent. And I don't remember if it was Chris Roberts or Richard Tyrer or something they talked about together. But the idea is they want to have enough content within, around a planet in terms of not just on the planet, but the planetary system. So a planet, its moons, the immediate area around it, its you know, first and third Lagrange point. They want you to have enough content within that immediate area, so that way they talked about making that planet your home. And so you are sticking around a planet for a much longer period of time before you migrate somewhere else. And you migrate somewhere else, you move your home, because you're progressing, in some way with your character or with a different organization or group, and something gameplay wise will take you, move you on to that next location. It's very much an MMO type thing. You go through the quests and the storyline, and then that progresses you to the next location. And so when you think about the 1.0 story and the location based stories and how those things tie together, that's kind of how they want that to flow, like a more sort of a traditional MMO does, with the story, in that you start off here and you follow the story along, and it moves you from location to location as you progress your character, you progress in the verse. And obviously you can do it in that way, but also, in the same way you can do it, in the sandbox way, or just going in and playing the game. But the game doesn't specifically and deliberately have you hopping around the solar system, or from solar system to solar system, um, a lot, or on a regular basis. More, if you do leave the planets, spending a lot of time on the planet's surface, but also going from the planet to stations in the immediate area, and other space-based POI, planets to the POI around the moons, and so on. but it's not just the travel aspect. There's a couple of things that tie into this. Um, First things first is we need to have a more efficient means of traveling in order to do, to achieve what they want. Um, and that comes with the new flight model and quantum boost. And I forgot to, but I meant to pull up the post where Yogi get working pool tables. Yeah. Well, you shoot you're in quantum travel and you shoot some pool, but then it's like moving a box in a cargo grid during quantum, and it just disappears because it didn't, make the transition. Because I don't know if you guys know, the way quantum travel works right now is it's a series of rapid teleports across space, which is why, you know, when you move from standing in a hallway to getting into a turret, the ship teleported and you didn't teleport with it during that transition. Or that's kind of how the transit system and elevators work in ships, is that they're teleporting while the ship is also teleporting, and you're moving in that teleport system and it stays with the ship, but you didn't teleport with it. The mouse tails. But so we need to, right now, with master modes, you have your SCM standard combat mode, and you have nav mode, with which nav mode allows you to quantum travel to fixed points, but then also do your max nav speed, which is basically the speed you can achieve with your quantum drive on, but not in quantum travel. And so that makes it very difficult for you to go from one point of interest to another, that are, longer distances, without being able to have more of an intermediate speed, because going from, 1,000 meters a second or whatever to, a significant, fraction of c of light speed, if not achieving light speed, it's a huge gap. And so that's why the flight model works the way it does right now, is because they need to have a way for us to get around a planet quickly without getting up into atmosphere. But then, you have to have you have to be able to quantum very quickly, a high speed, in order to get to these much more dispersed locations, because of the way server meshing does and how much content they can actually fit on a server within that server mesh. A server can only track so many entities. And right now we only have 10 servers in a mesh. And so they can't put, they've been having this problem for years, and it's less bad now with static server meshing. But they still have to spread out the content both in space and on a planet, so that way the server can stream stuff out. It isn't all loaded in, within that area at the same time. And so that's like part of the reason quantum travel works the way it does. Well, in the future, when we have dynamic server meshing and we can scale up a shard a whole lot and have a lot more servers and replication, replication layers that the players and servers are connected to, they can have that density of content that allows for that intermediate travel mode, between quantum travel and regular sort of SCM. So let's watch this clip from CitizenCon 2953, the Taking Flight segment, regarding how quantum boost will work, the necessity for it within the new flight model. And obviously, like, this is within master modes, but master modes are really still going to be there. They're just going to be delegated to operator modes. And we're getting rid of nav flight speeds. You're going to have your SAM speed. Quantum boost is going to replace nav flight speed, with your quantum uh, drive on. So let's watch this for a few minutes, and just pay attention to what they say and how they talk about it, and how it's supposed to fit into the game, because everybody was watching what they were doing but not listening to what they're saying, and how this sort of works and why is intended to work the way it does, and the trade-offs, and what it will allow us to do in the game.
the second mode, which is navigation. So navigation mode is basically the opposite of SCM. What this does is the quantum bubble will not stabilize itself, so you need to be hands-on for the whole time, and the speeds are naturally, well, slower, but it's not slow, it's still quantum traveling, right? Okay, so Brent, can you boost to... Oh, reinforcement needed. Yeah, let's go there, let's boost. Oh, actually, sorry. Thank you. Okay, so what Brent is currently showing here is, I think I forgot to mention, quantum boosting works in every direction. You don't need nav points. Brent is awesome, thank you. Okay, so now please boost to reinforcements needed. So if there's a nav point and you boost, your quantum travel system will pick that nav point to go to. Welcome to Pyro 3. As you can see, there's a lot of UI happening right now. There's a lot of context there. And this is not an online demo, it's a single player. So that means all these units there, they're friendly and hostiles, they're probably fighting with each other, which is a good segue to talk about AI improvements. And there's one man who can tell you all about AI. This is the man with the nicest legs at CIG. But please.
Okay, so that's how quantum boost, is supposed to work. You can be flying around in your, you take what we have now with master modes, and you're going to be able to, switch between the operator modes, just like we do in master modes right now, in terms of turning on your quantum drive, and turning off your shields, and vice versa. But quantum boost will allow you to boost in any direction for shorter distance, but at much higher speeds than we have in nav speed. But that's, allows you to go in any direction without having to have a quantum marker, because, we couldn't have, if we want to have this density of content that we need, to allow you to be able to stay around a planet and, on a planet and around a planet, in its planetary system, and be occupied for a longer, long period of time without moving around, you have to be able to get around that area. And you can't constantly be waiting for spool up, spool down, spool up, spool down. It really slows down the process a lot, and doesn't allow you to play the game as much as they want us to. And so this is that intermediate thing that, when we get to this point, you're the fractions of how much time you spend in SCM and nav flight and then quantum travel are going to change dramatically, because we'll still be in SCM quite a bit, but then most players will spend much less time actually in quantum travel and much more time boosting, compared to how much time we spent in nav. Hey, the prisoner 07. It can become auto after a little bit of holding it, but you have to actually target a nav point. Whereas you can quantum boost in any direction, but in order to actually achieve full quantum speed, you have to be going to a nav point. But the nav points aren't what we have, are just what we have right now. You'll be able to create your you'll be able to get nav points just from doing radar and scanning type stuff. Let's see, was there? So let's listen to Richard Tyrer and John Crew, mostly Richard Tyrer in this part. Let's see, we're at 120. Talk a little bit more about the upcoming changes to the flight model and why we're going the way we're going, and how this is going to function, because this is at CitizenCon 2024, so this is a little bit over a year after this presentation we just watched.
Part 3, final part of our conversation about life of spaceships in Star Citizen, and it's time to address the Idris in the room here. Master modes. We'd been talking about master modes for quite some time. We've been building it up as the big savior of the spaceship combat experience. It released to mixed reviews at times. Some people are for it, some people are less than for it. We'll just say that kindly. I want to talk about what our plan is, what our vision is. Where are we going with this? What is the plan moving forward with master modes? And I'm just going to take off and leave you two here. Yeah. Thanks, guys.
Right. I think the big thing around master modes is that it's never was designed to be a static piece of development. We always wanted to make sure that we were adding in new systems as they came along that then influenced those design decisions that we made at the time. And I think two big pieces of feature work that we're going to be bringing to Star Citizen that's going to have a drastic change on how we implement master modes is going to be crafting and quantum boost. So right now with master modes itself, we have obviously the two
affecting master modes, crafting and quantum boost. Okay, so we obviously have crafting tier 0 in, and it's already coming along. They're further developing it. But then we know, like I said earlier, that Yogi has been conducting internal and focus group testing of the new flight model, which includes the new quantum travel experience and quantum boost. And all that in enclosed NDA tests and stuff. And there's been some rumors about some people getting up in arms and like saying, "Oh, I'm going to quit Star Citizen because of this. I hate it, blah, blah, blah." People said that about master modes, and look at the game now. Look at where we are right now. Yeah, literally says it was never meant to be static. Master modes will be changing because the other part is like people look at these things in isolation, and you can never look at a gameplay feature in isolation because everything about Star Citizen it's because of how big the game is and how far-reaching the scope of it is it's holistic. It is a massive system of systems that are connected, and you can't just look at master modes in isolation from the other things that come into it. That's why he's bringing up crafting. That's why he's bringing up quantum boost and the new quantum travel experience, which is not just like what quantum travel looks like, but the way it functions. Instead, it's going to be a physicalized system versus a series of teleports, which is that's what causes so many of these issues. It's just like how we had so many issues with the transit system before they refactored it, and now the new transport system takes all those lessons learned and puts it into a much more updated system that is much more resilient and performant and so on. Well, the new quantum, travel experience does that as well as looks cooler, but also helps us navigate around the verse in a much more efficient, and controlled manner, with a lot more freedom too.
Master modes, SCM and Nav. A big thing is that we're going to actually be demoting or converting those modes from master modes to operator modes. What that inherently means is that we're still going to have a mode that is dedicated to fighting and having combat. There is going to be a mode that's dedicated to your quantum, but we're going to be removing some of the fail-safe restrictions, yes, that had when you're switching between these modes. We're going to be moving towards one cohesive speed between all operator modes. That speed is going to be more akin to what you'd imagine SCM speeds are now, but there's two big, huge caveats that come into that. First off is crafting. So crafting will allow you to upgrade your ship and to tier 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So if you want to have combat at higher speeds, if you have a tier 5 ship and you have the best thrusters and you've specialized, you've bought an interceptor ship, that will be more applicable to those types of ships. So that gives people options to choose, like I want to have this type of gameplay versus this type of gameplay. Having that cohesive, unified speed, the one thing that we really need to address is this kind of like nav flight mode that is kind of, it sits in this very odd position in terms of you get out of an LZ and you're flying up to the space station, in atmosphere, your speed is really closer to SCM speeds anyway. You're not flying at 1,000 meters a second. You can pick up start a bounty hunter mission now, be sent to another planet, and then the closest quantum point to that POI might be 500 kilometers away. And that means that As we add more dense POIs, that's going to only exacerbate this situation because we can't have quantum markers everywhere. And when we start to add more space exploration and more missions towards the different guilds that we're operating on, where you're having to go into deep space and go into these large distances, you don't want to be in a position where that's taking such a huge amount of time. We want you to be spending more time doing the mission than flying there. This is where Quantum Boost comes in. Now,
more time doing the mission, and it's not just the mission, but doing the content than flying there. So that, like he's about to say, that's where Quantum Boost comes in. But he was also alluding to it, just before that they also need to leave room for going out into deep space and to have the distances mean something. And that's part of where, Quantum Boost being allowing us to get, quantum traveling, between planets, a planet and its moons and stations and stuff. But also, if you have all this density of POI in a very short short area, rather than having a nav marker and having to full on quantum travel, there, or not having nav markers, you just say, okay, there's your mission location, and you just align to boost and you boost. But it allows you the freedom to say, okay, I want to drop out at this distance. I want to drop out at that distance, within obviously limitations of how the tech works. But it also leaves room, because, they want you to stick around a planet and engage in much shorter distance and have more contact. Oh, shit. I'm just going to raid. Oh, shit. A just got raided by the Chaotic Seekers. Apparently another stack up charity streamer. Oh, 7 Chaotic Seekers. Thank you so much for the raid. Really appreciate the support. Let's see. Owl Person Fish Bro. Stack up charity train. All right on. Yep. Well, thank you so much for coming by, and I hope you guys are interested in Star Citizen, because that's what we're talking about. This is the Pathfinders podcast. I am Trio311, your host and producer, and we're talking about the future of quantum travel, in the verse of Star Citizen. Hope you had a great stream, Chaotic Seekers. What were you up to this evening? And North, are you still there? Can you put a shout out command in for him on Twitch? Or do I pay you for nothing? Is it going? Make sure that's working. Says last seen playing special events. Doing our annual charity event for Stack Up. Enjoyed doing some art and playing some games. Oh, right on. Cool. What kind of art? I earlier in the show we were looking at the first versions of the colorized logo that I'm having made for my organization in Star Citizen that I've recently founded. So we're looking a little bit of art. But yeah, thanks so much for stopping by. Yep, if you guys are probably all new to this channel, but I follow the development of Star Citizen and Squadron 42. I play a lot of co-op games. I play a lot of Star Citizen. Star Citizen, the 4.8, the previous patch was rough, but 4.9 seems to be in a much better shape, and they've already got a hotfix channel up and running. So I had a long session last night, and I was having good fun. Things are definitely coming along, but the segment that we're doing right now, we're talking about how a few things that are on the near horizon for Star Citizen's development, where some things were closer than others, but we keep hearing about these things, and I'm going over how this stuff is intended to work out, so that way we're setting expectations for how the game's going to change and evolve, because there's going to be a lot of big changes and a lot of things that people need to wrap their heads around, and they're good changes, but it's whenever you're making, hey, this is how it's always been, and now it's going to be different, people oftentimes have a negative reaction. and it stops them from critically thinking. So we're going over some of the information in order to explain the how and why of how this will work. So that way we can, all have good expectation management for what it will look like in the future, because it's going to be a big change. And as always, I always am taking donations for StackUp. You can put ! charity in the chat to get a link to my Tiltify for StackUp, as well as ! StackUp in chat to get the links for StackUp's page and learn more about them. But they connect game veterans and members of the military with video games and gaming communities to combat the effects of PTSD and being deployed away from friends and family and support groups. And it works for me. I'm a former infantry Marine and current Army National Guard flight paramedic. And here's my gaming community. This is part of what I do to help maintain good mental health. So I love to support their mission. But let's keep listening to Rich here.
The way that Quantum Boost works is it connects your flight speeds to your quantum travel. So quantum travel is for flying millions of kilometers away when you have a specific quantum marker that you're flying towards. And then you've got your flight speeds, which should be, say sub 20 kilometers, where you're flying around, exploring on the planet, or fighting at a POI, or doing a bounty hunting. But anywhere above that, we want to accelerate that process of that navigation. And Quantum Boost goes all the way up to your top speed of SCM, or top speed of our flight mode, your current nav mode, all the way up to essentially a 1/10 of quantum travel speed. You have this spectrum of speeds that allow you to navigate the large spaces in our game, but also then still stay true to some of the intentions that we delivered with master modes.
Master modes we talked a lot about, and the combat side broadly staying the same. The nav side, that was the limiting factor. We often said, it's too fast, but not fast enough. The amount of times we watch new players go into nav, go towards a station, and then we'd be sat there going, they've not stopped in time. So Quantum Boost was always supposed to be that bridge gap, and without it, we were left with this sort of nav mode that didn't quite do what we wanted. And it also, because it's quantum and it's creating a bubble around your ship, allows us less friction in the traversal, because you go in quantum, you come out quantum, you don't have to apply all this G-force.
The rules of physics
are different because you're not physically hurtling at that speed, you're wrapping a bubble of time and space around yourself. So you come out, you can stop dead, you're not having that expanse moment where you're all being ripped apart from the G-force. So you see that space station coming towards you, you stop, you stop.
The one limitation that we are retaining is the fact that you can't have your quantum drive enabled and also your shields. And ultimately, that's a binary decision. Operator modes will start off as the default configuration that we've set in terms of the controls, in terms of the MFDs and what you're casting onto your HUD, in terms of your resource network presets. But that doesn't stop you from then going in and customizing it. We're providing an initial, hey, this is what we think is a good default setting. But then it's up to the players then to customize what they want on their cast, what they want on the MFDs, and then they have options to them. And they shouldn't have this constant switching modes to gain access to certain operator modes. We're removing some of that friction.
And through all of this, because that binary distinction is between modes, you have to be in this mode or this mode, and there's all these very strict rules between those modes, you keep your weapons through all this. So this now becomes a more tactical decision in combat. But if you need that sudden burst of speed, either to get away from something or to catch up to something, you make the choice. You sacrifice your shields, certainly, but you can still bring your weapons to bear instead of get there, and the second you're out.
And ultimately, that is underpinned by your resource network engineering. So if you're on a single-seater ship, that's obviously at the pilot's behest. But also if you're on a larger multi-crew ship, you can then use the engineering terminal to be able to have those presets available to you.
And through the use of crafting to improve your components and, of course, your presets, and Quantum Boost, rather, you can get up to speeds that are approaching the current nav speed and stuff like that. So we're not taking that speed away. We're defaulting everything to a speed that is closer to today's SCM. Yeah. And then giving the player choices in how and when they can get up to that speed without completely disabling
I
everything
mean,
on the
ultimately,
ship.
it allows us to keep the kind of the default. We're trying to move towards a balance across the game where you can start off easier and it gets harder. So we want the default to be open and compatible to lots of players, but then as you start to specialize and it becomes hard to master and you start to work in the different avenues of different professions that you like, that's where you can start to customize your ship. And I think there's a key takeaway or a key point to also make is that if you don't want to craft, if you don't want to go down that route because you just want to shoot ships and be a combat pilot, or you just want to be a miner or a space trucker, there's nothing wrong with that. You can still gain access to this because player trading is going to be something that allows players to gain access to these components and ships without having to go through some of the grind that they have, and obviously they're now reaping the benefits of that.
Okay. Pardon me. Hey, thanks so much for the raid, Chaotic Seekers. Enjoy the rest of your evening, 07s. The Prisoner, I am fine with master modes and having it being a hard switch. But I think it isn't like when they say they're delegating it to operator modes. I don't think we're going to feel all that much of a difference because, you're the way that quantum travel works is that you have to you're using quantanium in order to generate like negative mass in order to accelerate yourself to these speeds. So it's kind of like a warp bubble, but yeah, there is no physics in it. You come out of it and you don't have inertia or anything like that. But the way that quantum boost is going to work is that, okay, well, you operator modes and it's a preset and it turns off your shields and your shields go pew and your quantum drive spins up just like it does now, but you won't be able to instantly go to quantum travel your full speed, but you'll be able to turn it on and then go into a boost relatively quickly. So it's removing that friction, transitioning between SCM and quantum boost. But if you want to, go to full quantum travel speed, you're still going to have to wait for your, that essentially to charge up and build that field in order to achieve those speeds. Yeah, you can do it. Yeah, of course, you're gonna be able to do it from your pilot seat, but you can also, it's gonna allow for some things that go into the resource network and engineering that we're gonna talk about later on in here, because that's why this part of this is so important, is because it also leads to distance mattering more and bringing gameplay into going into those long distances. That's always been the idea for a long time. And there's a big post from CR from 2019 that talks about this, and like we're getting all these things in there. But yeah, but Sepsis Enjoy, you do have to realize that, soloing your Polaris is gonna get more difficult. And it was never the idea that you'd be able to efficiently operate a large or capital ship by yourself in any way, shape, or form. That's not the idea. It never has been, never will be. And you'll be able to do certain things from the pilot seat, but again, it also won't be the most efficient way of doing it versus having an engineer. Or you can be able to do the basics, but if you want to do more than that, you're gonna have to go back to an engineering panel and so on. So that's what they're talking about right here. So real quick, let's just let's go back. I want to show off the quantum travel bit. I think it's right here.
That is nav point that you see there on screen. Gives you access to the new quantum travel experience, which we got. When you're in nav mode and you're fighting speeds. So this means when you're in nav mode and you're to flee, you are being left with no shield. So imagine you're in a fight and you want to escape. You should not do it right away, because if you just swap to navigation mode in the hope to flee, you are being left with no shields. And the first thing that will go offline when you are hitting with distortion guns is the quantum drive. And that is important because the quantum drive will spool automatically up when you enter nav mode, and it will then unlock the higher speeds. So this means when you're in nav mode and you're fighting, you're very vulnerable, so you should get out as fast as possible. Luckily, navigation mode not only allows you higher speed, but also gives you access to the new quantum travel experience, which we're going to show in a minute. So that is nav point that you see there on screen. This is the point where I want to go to and quantum travel to. Before we do that, I need to quickly explain what this is about. So currently in the PU, when you quantum travel from A to B, you're actually not really moving. You're going on a spline, and you're teleported in every frame along that spline. So there's basically no meaningful gameplay we can add there. The new quantum travel experience is fully physicalized. Physics is always on, which means when you quantum travel from A to B, you're actually accelerating using our awesome physics engine. And because it's physicalized, it gives us a lot more meaningful gameplay we can play with. So Brent will start the quantum travel in a second. What will happen then is your quantum drive will initiate the jump. You will see an effect that distorts the space around you, and you will accelerate forward. During the acceleration process, so this is the time until you actually reached your cruise speed, the ship will experience forces, and you as a player, you're responsible to counter these forces. So there is an element of failure. Okay, Brent, let's show that. And take your hands off. So what you just saw is basically the failed attempt to quantum travel. Brad wasn't countering the forces, therefore he was thrown out, the quantum bubble collapsed and threw you out. Your ship doesn't like that. IFCS needs 5-6 seconds to recover from that, during which time you're just tumbling, right? And this is not just like dependent on your skills. If you think selecting a proper quantum drive doesn't matter in the future, think again. You want to take care of your quantum drive, you want to repair it and keep it in good shape. So if you buy a cheap one, your travel will not necessarily be faster, but it might be harder. Okay, so Brent showed us how it's done properly. Is locked. You can now go hands off. Okay, so there's a second variant of quantum travel, and this is for.
Yeah, so he just jumped, I think it started out like 5 or 6 gigameters, and now this next one is a much smaller distance.
Okay, so there's a second variant of.
This is going from like an asteroid field or an asteroid belt around a planet, or near a planet, back to the planet. So this is when you would use, you could use quantum boost, you could use quantum travel, but you're going to see the difference between generating an actual quantum bubble to achieve those high speeds of actual quantum travel versus what we do in quantum boost.
Quantum travel, and this is for short-range jumps. Sometimes you jump somewhere or you go somewhere, and you see the next point of interest is like 1,200 kilometers away. We're not going to force you anymore to travel that by hand. You will use a technique called quantum boosting. It's a quantum-based short-range jump for like something between a couple of 100 kilometers to like 30,000 kilometers or so. When you use quantum boosting, the process is practically the same, but the quantum bubble will not stabilize itself, so you need to be hands-on for the whole time, and the speeds are naturally, well, slower, but it's not slow, it's still quantum traveling, right? Okay, so Brent, can you boost to... Oh, reinforcement needed. Yeah, let's go there, let's boost. Oh, actually, sorry. Thank you. Okay, so what Brent is currently showing here is, I think I forgot to mention, quantum boosting works in every direction. You don't need nav points. Brent is awesome, thank you. Okay, so now please boost to reinforcements needed. So if there's a nav point and you boost, your quantum travel system will pick that nav point to go to. Welcome to Pyro 3.
You see how quickly he was able to move around, and quantum boosting versus having to form a complete quantum bubble, and do what we do right now. It's meant to be a much more efficient system, less friction in term, as well as offering you a lot more freedom and control. And things don't have to have a quantum marker. They don't have to create a quantum marker for everything. You can just go. So let's talk about why this is important in terms of being able to, hey, this is, we're going to have this new quantum travel experience with quantum boost, in order to be able to navigate, a universe. But it's what we want in order to have this density of content where you stick around a planetary system versus hopping around the solar system, or between solar systems all the time. Now, obviously, if you're doing hauling, and you're doing interplanetary or intersystem hauling, well, yeah, that's different. But for the majority of gameplay, it isn't that. You're not crossing the system on a very regular basis. And the density of content will allow, most professions and most types of players to be able to stay within a certain area for a longer period without having to transition around a lot. Let's see. So let me just make sure I've got the timestamp correctly. 34. Okay. Yep. Cool. Hey, no worries, Mount Stunner. This is what we're here for. We're doing it together. We're doing it live.
Those new planets and biomes were pretty, right? But it's time from Phase 3 Civilization to give you some stuff to do. So, let's talk about location density. We've emulated nature as well as we can to make sure our planets are physically based and realistic. From Phase 3 Civilization to give you some planets and biomes. All right. Those new planets and stuff. Sure, our planets are physically based and realistic, and our biomes are emergent. But it's time to start populating the verse, because where there's people, there are their lives and the structures they build. So it makes sense that whenever you go and explore these planets, that you find their lives. And what's even more important is that when we make these structures, that they use and they follow the same rules as our biomes, such as the jungles and the swamps. But before we continue, let's first take stock as to where we are now. At the moment in the verse, we have these custom, beautifully made locations, such as Ghost Hollow, we've got our distribution centers, or even just some outposts. And these have all been handcrafted by our designers and artists to hit that benchmark. And they've been working directly on the planet. However, going forward, this doesn't really scale with how we want to go forward with the game. Server meshing is about to arrive, and we're going to have a way higher player count. So those 73 bunkers across Stanton just won't cut it. But in general, it's also pretty barren. There's not much.
So, and when he is saying server meshing, he's not just talking about where we are with static server meshing right now. Now, obviously, we know that since we got static server meshing, we've gotten more content. We aren't limited to one server doing, a whole single star system. We've got 10 servers now doing 3 star systems. Before Nix, it was, 10 for 2. But people really don't understand the scale of what dynamic server meshing is intended to do. In that, and we'll talk more about that in a few minutes, but CIG wants per shard, like we have a shard right now, for there to be tens of thousands of players. And you don't achieve that by scaling up more and more servers. You achieve that as players, we are not connected to the server. You are connected. Here's the server or servers, the 10 servers in the mesh. Here's the replication layer along with the other services in the hybrid service. And here's all the players in that shard that are connected to here. And so we can, we transmit information to the replication layer. It does it to the servers that are simulating the area, that you are assigned to, where they have entity control over where you are, and then backwards. It's that relationship. Well, right now we have one replicant, one replication layer, and one hybrid service with all the other backend services that are needed to run a single shard. The goal for dynamic server meshing is to scale the replication layer and the other services up just like they did the number of servers in a mesh. So that way, say, within a year we could have just at the sort of very first version of it would, you could potentially have a replicant per star system, where along with efficiency changes, you could have, 1,000 players per replicant per star system. And then each star system could have 10 servers. And then you scale it up further. There's a replicant per planetary system. Or even, and so you can have 1,000 people around a planetary system, or even further beyond that, you have a replicant for, a single planet, and then another replicant for the moons and space around that planet, or however you want to break it down. But the way that has to happen is right now when we when we move around the game verse, you transition from one server to another, but you stay connected to the same replication layer. The way this has to scale up is that you not only when you can within a given area of authority, you'll have multiple servers in a mesh, connected to one replicant along with all the players within that area of authority. But then if you go out of that area of authority, say, out of atmosphere on that planet and out to the space around it, you transition not only to another server, but another server within another mesh, and you hand off your connection from that replicant to a different replicant. And so if you remember the server meshing demo where they had both servers within that mesh simulating what you were doing at that border, well, in this next iteration in dynamic server meshing, not only will two servers be sharing entity authority over you, but you will have two replicants essentially sharing that connection and saying, okay, but you are essentially connected to both of them as they do that handoff, and both of those servers are making sure that, or both of those replicants are making sure that both of those servers are accurately receiving the same information as you make the transition from one to a next. And that's how you go from, 600, 700 people in a shard to the 1,000 people they want to get to before the end of the year, to having 1,000 people on a planet. Like Chris Roberts was talking about back in 2018, 2019, if not more, because they scale up all of it. Hey, Coffee Gaming 07, good to see you. Thanks for stopping by. Hope you're doing well. But as part of that, they can't have everybody in the game transitioning, across, essentially, getting handed off constantly from one replicant, and in its mesh with its assigned servers to another, for every mission, as you're constantly bouncing around the system. They want you to stay within a planetary system because in general, a planetary system will have, essentially, one mesh all to itself, with 10 servers, and one replicant, and about 1,000 people, hanging around Hurston and its moons. But you think about how much, how much of a significant change in scale that is. Whereas right now you might have, 100 to 200 people on that server, simulating probably even 2 or 3 planets within Stanton, 2 planets within Stanton, but now you could have 1,000. You're looking at a single order of magnitude change, within a given area, and that's essentially, and that's just players. Now you have to also take into everything else, so they can't have us constantly zipping around. So distance has to mean something. Those transitions have to mean something, and it has to be, but they also have to give incentive for players to not be doing that, to reduce the number of players that are moving constantly across the game universe, to reduce the number of transitions. Because when you do those handoffs, you do it in a ship, they're handing off not only you and all the entities on you, your armor, your backpack, your clothes, everything in the backpack and on your, that's equipped on you, but then imagine how many entities are, me and my Idris, and the Carrying Crows, and we've got that thing chuck full of loot, and we're having to get handed off every few minutes to, for the next mission. Now, Sunder says there are prominent SC streamers out there implying that instancing is only being developed because meshing has failed. And it's like, how many times do they have to tell you that instancing is a step on the way to dynamic server meshing? Because imagine what I just talked about, how you take what we have in terms of a mesh right now, but you apply it to just a planetary system. But then you have multiple things of instance content within that planetary system. What that does is you enter that instance, and you may be on a server that is the server that is simulating New Babbage. And well, that server is pretty full because there's a whole bunch of people coming and going around New Babbage because it's a city and then we're going to have more reasons to go there and such. And so if that New Babbage server or Orison server is having to run all the instances of municipal works, that load in there, that server is going to get bogged down. What instancing does is it allows them to, you enter a server in New Babbage, you enter a server on Orison or in Levski, and you go through the portal to enter that instance, be it an elevator, a door, what have you. That instance gets moved to a different server within that mesh. So now you are, whichever one has the performance overhead to do it. And that's how you make each one of those individual meshes much more efficient and have a much more even distribution of performance throughout that mesh. So that way you don't have big changes. This server for New Babbage is, barely hanging in there at 8 to 10, FPS on the server, but the one for Clio is pinned maxed out at 30 because there's hardly anyone there. Well, all that does is, you and everybody going into that instance, and all the entities within that instance are now being, simulated, and controlled by this server over here. And it allows for dynamic redistribution of players and the entities that they interact with, that are in the game area around them, to be moved onto servers that have the performance overhead. But because it's done dynamically, spinning up and spinning down servers and moving you dynamically across these, from one server to another, it's that those dynamic transitions versus what we have right now, which are static transitions, essentially. That's why it's the step on the way to dynamic server meshing. Because if CIG just had to spin up a server every time this one got overloaded, that system would become much more complicated. But if the reason that it's getting overloaded is because people are coming to go do this instance content, it can allow it to redistribute it much more efficiently. And dynamic server meshing was always meant to be a much more efficient use, especially cost-effective use of server resources. And instancing takes that to another level. Instead of spinning up a whole nother server for you and your group of 10 people going onto this instance, it just moves you onto a different one that's in the mesh that already has the room. But that's because people don't understand how server meshing works, no matter how many times Star Citizen tells them, because everybody just, eyes roll back, fades to black when they start talking about it, because they're like, okay, cool, server performance get better. No, you're not understanding the why, and because it makes a difference. It has an impact on how we play the game and why they are designing these other systems in this way, from instancing to quantum travel to Starchitect and how the density of content, like all this is part of this cohesive, holistic system of systems that you can't look at in isolation.
For you to explore and find stuff.
Let me back up a little bit.
Going forward, this doesn't really scale with how we want to go forward with the game. Server meshing is about to arrive, and we're going to have a way higher player count. So those 73 bunkers across Stanton just won't cut it. But in general, it's also pretty barren. There's not much for you to explore and find stuff out there. So there's no exploration gameplay. You haven't really put your character to use for the way that you should. So this means we need to go bigger, which means we need to change our workflow. And with any workflow means we need to first establish a new benchmark. So with our new benchmark, we are ensuring quality and improve on our previous work and make it even better. And any location that you'll find needs to have its own unique personality and no repetition. We don't want you to find the same location twice. This also means that this is your exploration and your findings. So when you go out there and explore with your Carrack or with your Corsair, is that whatever you find, you can share with your orgs or with your friends. As for that density, if you fly down to the planet, we want you to find something, let's say, every 100 clicks.
So the every 100 clicks part is important, because I don't know if you guys have noticed this, but in some of the commercials and other demos that they've done, they've shown the new quantum travel experience, and they've shown people engaging their quantum drives very close to the surface of the planet. Now, this is why this is important, because they're essentially showing us that rather than having to climb all the way out of the atmosphere to engage quantum travel, at a much lower level, you'll be able to start quantum boosting, because it's not that super strong bubble, quantum bubble that you need to achieve in order to achieve those speeds. You're able to achieve quantum boost at much closer to the ground in order to okay, well, you're not going to be able to quantum boost at ground level, but you go a little bit higher and then you can quantum boost around the planet in order to explore it much more efficiently. But having locations and things to find much closer than they are now, but that only works if you have if they have much each one of these things has tons of entities, and you can if you're watching the R display info, you can see how many entities are being tracked by your server, and they're all being maxed out by how much is available. So that's why they have to be able to subdivide planets and moons and the whole planetary, the way planetary systems are, in order to fill these areas up with way more entities and way more servers and way more people. But they can't have you constantly, making these massive transitions. They want to keep you on a server, within a smaller space than we do now before you do another transition. So they're not having to handle as many handoffs as we do, would right now if we scaled it up in the same way.
Also improve the mission experience. So when you stay more on the planet, you're more immersed and you go from location to location. Just keep going. So going forward, we are
location to location versus server to server to server.
Modularizing all our existing locations and assets, and we're basically making a library of buildings and layouts that we'll be using to no longer work directly on the planet. The neat thing, all these modules and assets can be iterated upon and tested right in the editor for all the designers and artists, to ensure fun gameplay and interactive sandbox activity, and also make sure all the mission stuff is there. Basically, we're building a toolkit. So let's look at some of the things that we need to keep in mind as we are making that toolkit. First and foremost, we've got our art style and branding. We've got things like Frontier for our settlements. We've got high-tech for the emergency shelters, but also utilitarian, like our bunkers and distribution centers. The richer the data, the richer these locations will be. Secondly, derelict ships. We've got these all over, but we can do better. But the nose of Starfare laying around. So, let's talk about coherency. Sure, we can scatter all these locations everyone on the planet, and you'll find them in places they make sense, but we can do better. You don't just want to find an outpost completely on its own, right? We want to make sure it really feels like people have built their lives here. So, let's talk about some missing bits. We want to tell tighter stories, such as the people's lives, but also logical exploration. If I find one thing, I expect to find something similar or something else nearby. We also need more data control. What defines one mining outpost being different from the other ones, aside from the harvestables? And also give the narrative developments. Make sure people build near rivers, on mountains. They build near town halls. They build near distribution centers. So to hit that bit of our benchmark, we make sure that locations are near each other and group them together. The effect it gives is a fully developed landscape with vistas and points of interest all over. And we group them together in what we like to call a cluster, like this one, that has 13 locations.
So as I go through this part, I want you to watch how many, the sort of numbers. Because if you've got a cluster with 13 locations, and then something else, and then something else, and something else, you want to think about, okay, how many entities are being spawned by those locations when players approach them? And pardon me. And how does that affect server performance with the more people that are around these locations, and spawning more and more of them in? And think about, if you're looking at this planetary map with all these different subdivided circles, like how could they subdivide a planetary map, in logical ways, so that way, you've got essentially server regions within a mesh on a planet handled by a single replicant, and 1,000+ players.
Let's talk about clusters. Clustering means generating locations near other locations. So, for example, if you find a distribution center, just like in the verse currently, I would find forward operating bases next to them. But if you go even further out, you'd find mining outposts to funnel those resources to the FOBs. Go out even further, you'd find caves around them, because that's where they might find some of the gems. And then we can even specify the data on a cluster level. All of the factions that live at this whole cluster, any mining outpost, that would be the same people, but also what commodities they sell, to find on what resource you'd find. So let's look at an example of the clusters. We have our mining cluster. Again, we can define what rules we should have. Rules, well, near a resource, just like our mining outpost, but also it needs to be on a lawful planet. We can target on a planetary scale where they would need to be. They need protection. As for the targets, well, caves, mining outposts, but even trade posts. Let's go to the other side of the spectrum. Before I do so, I forgot data. We can, on a cluster level, specify, again, what mineral commodities, but also what harvestable types you'd find are in that region. Now let's look at the other side of the spectrum, an unlawful cluster. What rules? Well, they need to be far away from any other cluster, because they want to be isolated and do their evil deeds on their own. And also on an unlawful planet, such as somewhere in the Pyros system. For the targets, outlaw outposts, crash ships, because they would shoot them down, and also ruins from just places they just completely overrun. The data on this one, you'd find specific loadouts, and they'll be using weapons that you wouldn't find in any other legal system. And these weapons will be sold at the shops in these regions. So, now that we have a cluster, let's go even bigger. Just like our locations, we can put clusters near other clusters, and we group them together, ranging between 10 to 15 locations each. And we group this into what we call a sector. Like this one, that has about 120 locations. However, on a planetary scale, we can define how many sectors we should have, with each their own data and persona. And every single one of these locations is now ready for the mission system to hook up and give you gameplay. And for you to find a bunch of places on your own.
So they did just talk about in the monthly report recently how the mission system is being hooked into Starchitect to work just like this. So Starchitect and Genesis has definitely come along. They also talked about how they will have mission boards, and the mission boards would give, at the location. So you go to the location to get the job, and that job takes you to another location. That's part of how they chain these things around, so you stay around a planet. You go to a location, you get another, because we're always trying to chain jobs and everything in order to be more efficient, kind of like how you do with hauling. You're trying to chain those things, and so you never have an empty load. Well, you go to, you get a job here, and it might take you to some jobs here, but then you finally find one that takes you to this one, and then you find, do some more over here, and you're essentially island hopping, sticking around, constantly having gameplay and things to do with these different clusters before moving on to the next one, and the next one, the next one. Then finally, you may get to a job, or you might get to a point with your rep or what have you, that finally takes you out to a moon, or takes you, to the next planet, and so on. But if each one of these clusters has all these locations, and there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, they can, you could have multiple, a single server handling a handful of clusters, and be able to manage lots of people and lots of entities while maintaining performance, and then redistributing things as people join instance content, depending on where they are.
And just on this side of the planet, can you guess the number? We've got about 3,042 locations.
And now, obviously, not every planet will have density like this. Some will be more, some will be less. It just depends on the planet. They talked about the rules and everything, depending on, the system, whether it's a habitable world, all that sort of stuff. But, this sort of illustrates what that would look like in a server mesh environment, and how you would have to how we would navigate a dynamic server meshing environment, and how we would navigate around a planet, and how it would keep us navigating around a planet in a way that didn't involve us transiting the solar system all the time, or even or from or between solar systems, or between planets all the time. So along that line, let's look at the a little bit from the letter of the chairman that just came out. This was back in the beginning of January, end of December, I think it was. There's this most recent one. So eye on the horizon, looking ahead to 2026. Server meshing will become dynamic. So they are targeting dynamic server meshing, or at least the first iterations of it this year. I don't think we're going to get there. I think one of the fallouts of them taking this sort of pause in order to harden these things is if you look at the various things that they put on their list of things that, systems and features that they're hardening in order to improve our experience, every single one of those things is heavily dependent on engineering, the engineering teams. Both the network engineers, people who would be working on, server meshing and all the different components within it, but also the different, gameplay engineers and feature engineers that that have to work on their systems in order to integrate with the back end. So them having to take a pause in order to, and what people don't understand is that when they release features, when they release tech and stuff, it's not done. They release it with, a certain percentage or fraction of the features that they want it to eventually have, but they have gotten it to a point where they need to release it to us, and they've gotten it to a point where it's ready enough to release to us, where they can start getting feedback and data from it in order to further develop it and finish adding in the features. And they've talked about this in the monthly reports with so many different things, and people just don't realize. They think about, oh, well, it's done. And it's like, well, this didn't meet our expectations. It's like, yeah, motherfucker, it ain't done. They've only developed it as far as they can, and now they need to develop something else that ties into it before they can further develop that, or release it to us so we can test it and they can get data and figure out how to further develop that. Well, that's what all of these things that we've been having all these negative experiences with are dealing with. They got released to us unfinished. they finished to a point enough where they could release it and we could get data on it in order for them to further develop it, but they still require a lot of hardening. They need additional features added to those feature sets and features to the tech in order to give the full experience and have the full functionality that they want, as well as get that additional development to make them as robust and stable and performant as they need to be to give the intended experience. So they're pausing, and a good number of these people who would be working on, part of the reason the instancing has taken another month, but that's it pushes back instancing, which is part of the road to dynamic server meshing. So it's going to push back dynamic server meshing. And if you've been listening, I don't think we can have Genesis and Starkitect planets without dynamic server meshing, or at least the first iteration. And I think they're pushing really hard for this stuff, but just like with everything else, we've always complained that, hey, CIG released this and they should have waited until they released that. And it's like, well, if they waited, they don't know how soon that other bit's going to, come. They don't know how soon it's going to take. And then these other people are sitting on their hands, unable to further develop their features or continue on their work until this next thing comes along. So we'll see how smooth this rollout goes, but it seems like that this cohesive system of us getting the new flight model with the new quantum travel experience and quantum boost, along with getting dynamic server meshing, along with getting Genesis planets and Starkitect, are all proceeding in a way that they're trying to release them as part of a sort of cohesive experience, or in a near enough window from each other that they are able to achieve that experience within a reasonable time frame, that it isn't too jarring for us as players. It's going to be jarring, it's going to be big changes, but they can't be releasing Genesis planets with Starkitect and thousands of locations, but then have it all on a single server and people flocking to Nix 1, and it just absolutely overloading that server and being unable to handle it. And we need the new flight model and the quantum travel experience in order to manage our travel between these locations, between this new version of server meshing as we move into static server meshing. But he says server meshing will become dynamic, allowing the mesh to reconfigure in real time. That's what instancing does. It is reconfiguring the mesh. It is moving people from one place on the mesh to another based on player activity and server load. That's what instancing does. It just helps make dynamic server meshing even more efficient than it would be already. This evolution is foundational to support the large-scale group experiences we've always envisioned, and will enable us to expand the universe even further. Our goal is to have thousands of players in the same shared universe instance. Components of the server meshing systems are also being leveraged to deliver instanced areas and experiences. These things aren't mutually exclusive, but how did all these, as you guys said, these big content creators missed this fucking paragraph where they spelled it out just 6 months ago, how these things are not mutually exclusive. They are all part of the same cohesive system of systems. Come on, folks, not hard. The collective memory of the Star Citizen community and the especially content creators is that of a freaking lemming. I swear to God. God dang Dory from Finding Nemo. Are also being leveraged to deliver instance areas and experiences, allowing our designers to craft balanced content that integrates seamlessly into the universe. Yeah, they probably don't even bother to read this stuff, and it's like, God, it would not kill you. It would not kill you, especially given how much angst there is. And it's like, you are deliberately choosing to be angry rather than informed, when you could spend so much less effort and energy to just be informed and then not be angry. It's just, I don't get it. So next, we're going to listen to a little bit of this interview. I covered this interview a little bit a while back with bits of it regarding, I think, what was it? What was that segment? Anyway, pardon me. We're going to listen to this part because this follows on from the letter of the chairman, but talks about how this sort of all ties in. We're going to listen to this clip.
So one of the biggest things that takes us time is we've had systems that we wrote years ago when people were thinking, oh, the game's not going to need all this, and then we got to go, okay, that system's not good enough. We need to refactor the system so it scales better.
The transit refactor and then being redone to transport. The mission system refactor now moving on to mission system v2. We are in static server meshing, and they're going to have to refactor and build new services so that way we can scale up to dynamic server meshing.
Better when there's a lot of players. So we want to have as big as possible player environments at the highest concurrency. So we don't quite know what the ceiling is going to be, but with dynamic it allows us to be much more flexible because we can dynamically spin up more and more servers to sort of collapse down the servers taking care of people. So I mean the goal.
And they keep saying servers, but it's layman's terminology in order to say, because you can't just say, okay, you know, the limiting factor right now is how many players can be connected to a replicant, a replication layer. Well, you can't just add more servers and you know, double the player count and double the number of connections to that replicant and expect it to work. You know, that's why we're capped at, well, they have to dynamically spin up more servers as part of additional meshes within a shard.
The goal is to have 10,000 plus people in a shard or an instance. Right now we run 700 to 800 people on one. We'll probably break over 1,000, I'm pretty sure, this year. When we go dynamic, maybe 1,000 to 2,000. There's still optimization that has to happen in like the engine for just general simulation stuff. Because it's a really interesting
So they're shooting for 1,000 to 2,000 people this year. And the way they do that with dynamic is being able to scale it so that way, you know, if the population on a shard is low, they say, okay, we only have one replicant and it's managing all 3 star systems. But then being able to scale that up and say, okay, now we can scale it up so that way we can make it dynamic so that way each system can be its own mesh with a replicant and 10 servers, you know, and that way you can have 700 people, you know, 700 people in each system. And that way, when you move from system to system, that's when the handoff occurs between replicants is via that the jump tunnel.
Like engineering challenge, because like most game programmers don't consider how a game will run when you would have thousands of players. I mean, they usually don't consider when you have thousands of just entities or objects. For me, that's fun because then it makes the universe itself gets alive when you have lots of players. I mean, it's already like in Star Citizen when we went from 100 to 600 to 700 when we did the shards, it's suddenly like you would be at a space station, you can see other players come and go in a way that you wouldn't have done when there was just 100 players and a whole star system. And so you want a universe that feels alive.
Part of the reason they're getting rid of the nav speeds is you can't have people flying around at nav speed around a space station with 10 times the player, you know, 10 times the player population, you know, or more, 10, 20 times. So in order to sort of give the idea of how this scale stuff has to work and why the travel has to change, and I was going to bring it up, but with the new spreadsheet, it doesn't illustrate it. But if you guys, here, we're going to move this over. So the July 1st Roadmap Roundup, when they added the stuff to 410, one of the things they added was the fuel tanks and consumption rebalance. And you may have seen in the leaks the spreadsheet they made showing how essentially the end of it being a lot of ships had their range dramatically reduced, how far they could travel on a single tank of fuel. Their fuel tanks were, you know, a lot of their fuel tanks were just brought more in line with how big the ship was. But then they changed the consumption rates with the stock quantum drive for that ship to give them new values. And so a lot of ships were brought much more in line with how far it was more believable that they could travel on a single tank of fuel. And reducing the effective range, you know, is the first step towards making those changes to make distance matter. And then the next step will be changing speeds. in terms of higher, your top speed and acceleration and stuff in order to balance that, to make it so that way small ships can zip around a a planetary system very quickly, but in order to, they struggle to get quickly from one planetary system to another, or are unable to make those longer jumps on a single tank of fuel without support or without stopping at stations along the way. But this is that first step, and it got pushed to 4.10. But if you didn't see that chart, it was very eye-opening, the direction that they were going, and that's just one step. And of course the card on the roadmap, shows the Starlight refueling a Hornet, because that's the point, is to be able to not go as far without refueling. And okay, well, instead of having to go to a station all the dang time, you just call for refuel. And so if you can't get as far, even within a planetary system where you run out of fuel faster, rather than having to constantly go back to a station and everything, you just call for fuel and you keep on going to the next mission out in space. And you go from you quantum boost to quantum boost to quantum boost, doing more missions without having to stop playing. And you spend more time playing because you're boosting instead of quantum traveling around, rather than having to go back to a station. You more time, as Rich Tyler said, more time playing the game versus less time traveling. But they still have to have room for long distance travel gameplay, and where that factors in. Oh, I forgot to bring up one thing. Hold on, I gotta pull it up. Let's see, drive, and let's see, where's here we go. So we're going to enter the star map, the good old ARC star map, and it's been working in full screen mode, so hopefully we don't have any issues here. But we're going to look at the first 5 systems. So we started off with Stanton. Here we are. And then we got Pyro. And then from Pyro, we've got a jump to Nyx. And then we also will be getting Castra. I don't think we're going to get it this year, but I think we're definitely going to see it next year. And who knows how quickly with Genesis and Starkitect they'll be able to redo the planets of Pyro and Stanton after getting in Nyx and potentially Castra. But I don't think it's going to be a huge endeavor. But basically we have this sort of line of 5 in that you go from Terra to Stanton to Pyro to Nyx to Castra, but Castra is also connected to Pyro via a large jump point. And then you can also get to from Nyx to Stanton, looks like, yeah. But also from Pyro to Terra and so on. So there's sort of this like 2 triangles connected together via Pyro. Stanton, Pyro, Terra, and then also the triangle between Stanton, Pyro, Nyx, and then the triangle between Pyro, Nyx, and Castra. But you have to have distance matter. And one thing that people don't realize is that there's the route planner. Yeah, and with smaller tanks, it will make it easier and faster to refuel as well. Yep, as well as being able to support more ships if you are the refueler. You can with smaller tanks and everything like that, that refueler, whether you have a Starfighter or Starlight, eventually a Vulcan and what have you, you'll be able to support a whole squadron of fighters and other, bombers or industry ships, essentially it makes that tooth to tail ratio, whether you're doing combat or, industry gameplay, much more efficient versus having much larger tanks and such. But you have to, it gives a purpose for those people by having smaller tanks with higher consumption. But with the route planner, and again, this is what the star map has on it right now. But you could have a route, and let's say we want to go from Terra, and we want the actual planet in the Terra system, and we want to go to Cascom, the Cascom planet. So, let's see, Cascom, planet in Castra, and then calculate. Oh, we want large jump point. So if you went via through Stanton, so from Terra to Stanton, Stanton to Nyx, Nyx to Castra, it's 24.85 AU. Right now, the Pyro system is just under 10 AU across. Stanton is 5 AU across, and that's from the furthest edge of the system to the next. We don't usually make those jumps. But then if you go through Hadrian, it's 90 AU. So it would be Terra to Hadrian, Hadrian to Castra. That would be sort of your safe route versus going from Stanton to Pyro to Nyx, or Stanton to Pyro to Castra. Having to go through Pyro and Nyx, which are unlawful systems. Yeah, especially for the Vulcan. So you have to have distance matter, and for distance to matter while also making it so that way ships have smaller ships have less range, you have to have the gameplay to make those longer jumps matter between planets, and then between from system to system for the ships that it matters for. Those people who are doing the logistics gameplay, your whole sea and other large haulers and stuff. But the way that works, and we also need to look at the size of star systems that we have. So I made this spreadsheet a few years back using the star map and what we knew in terms of system sizes. And I'm sorry it's white, but going back and forth with dark mode, because Google doesn't have dark mode for this, is a pain. But so we can look at the, let's see, it was, how do I sort? It was, how did I do this before? All right, there we go. Okay. Actually, let's go by the first 5 systems. So let's see, sort column by A to Z. So we have Stanton down here is 5 AU. We have Pyro here. It was 13. They dropped it down to just shy of 10. So it dropped by a few AU. And then we don't even know what the official size for the Nyx system is now that it's in game, because we don't know if they've set it, because it's not done. But Nyx is 11 AU. So about the same size as Pyro, but still double the size of Stanton. It actually used to be 29 AU. They used to make a whole bunch of adjustments to the star map every quarter or so to bring things in line with how they wanted. But Castra, being the next system, is 22 AU. And then Terra, the last system, the line of 5, is 12 AU. So systems aren't getting smaller. There are a lot of small systems, what I call small systems. So I broke it up into categories, and the number of systems that are 10 AU or below, is 30 out of essentially 100. A third of the systems are small or extra small. But then the 10 to 20 ratio is another 20 systems, which is significantly larger than Stanton, and a few AU bigger than the systems we have right now. And then but then if you scale it from 20 to 20 AU to 100, you're going from 50 to 70. That's another 20 systems that are between 20 and 100 AU. And then we have several, like another 10 systems that are over 100 AU. Some of them way, way, way bigger. And so they want distance to matter. They've always wanted distance to matter. And this is after they made the changes to those systems and balance it out. But they do want systems that are going to be larger where distance matters. And the way you do that is via quantum travel gameplay. And we don't have people, like, I can't tell you how many people have said, oh, we're never going to get that. That's a pipe dream. You know, they got rid of that idea. We don't have this because we don't have the quantum travel experience that allows this to work, because we don't have all of engineering that goes into this that allows you to do this sort of gameplay. Yeah, the solar system is actually 50 here, and I'll share this link with you guys, and I'm gonna put it in the show notes as well. But anyone with a link copy, we'll put this in the chat right now. Sol is 55, I think. Where do we go? Yeah, Sol is 51 AU. It's a big system. But then, so we talked about going the route from Terra to Castra via Hadrian. The reason it's so long, even though you're jumping through less systems, because the other route gave you, I think it was Stanton to Pyro, Pyro to Nyx, Nyx to Castra was the shorter route. It's only 20 something. But then if you go, and this is also based off where the jump points are in the system. But if you go the route from Terra through Hadrian to then get to Castra and get to, you know, from those planets, you know, to those planets, you know, and to the jump points and so on. Hadrian is, where was it? I just saw it a second ago. Hadrian, right here. 65 AU, and that will probably be one of the soonest systems to come out after the first 5 for 1.0. Odin is right here. Odin is 21 AU, and that's where we spend a lot of time, you know, like, you know, the majority of the game in the first episode of Squadron 42. If we go back to the star map, here's Terra, here's Hadrian, here's Nyx, another system that might come fairly soon, you know, in terms of systems that are connected. So here's Odin, you know, Tanga, the Vega system. Here, we're going to put it back to, let's see, Vega. Vega is 8 AU. Tanga is 83 AU. Oso is 16 AU. All of these things are systems that are pretty close. Bremen is very close by, and Bremen's another small system, only 6 AU. So it's, you know, Oya, you know, these systems that are right here on the Xi'an border. You know, there's so many, you know, Magnus. Let's look at Magnus. Magnus is another one that we think could come very soon, because it's connected to, Magnus is connected to Stanton and Terra. Magnus is 14 AU, so good sized systems. Not getting much in the way of smaller systems like Stanton. But the way we have, you know, higher quantum travel speeds for the ships it makes sense for, you know, is via engineering, you know, and using these large ships for what they're for, in terms of, you know, going from, you know, one system to another for interplanetary trade, for larger scale military style operations and such. Oh, the prisoner lost internet for the last couple of minutes. Sorry, buddy. So let's read. This is a post from Chris Roberts about how quantum travel is supposed to work, and none of this has changed. But it explains the why of longer distance quantum travel, but it also helps to explain the why shorter distance quantum travel will work the way it works when we have quantum boost, and we're going, you know, sticking around more within a a planetary system and being able to have less friction, less time having your quantum drive cool down and such. So we're going to skip down to this part right here. The idea behind the quantum drive and jump drive is that it requires a huge amount of power, and the process that involves converting quantum matter, quantanium, into a negative energy field generates significant amount of heat that must be dealt with. We don't have like any heat gameplay yet in engineering. You can put more pips into, your components will overheat if you don't have enough power, and power routed to your coolers, but you don't have we're with engineering, they eventually want us to have heat gameplay in that you reroute coolant where you want it to go, not just rerouting power. Reroute coolant to weapons, to your shields, to your quantum drive. Instead of not just turning off other things, but being able to reroute coolant as needed. Generates a significant amount of heat that must be dealt with. The continued operation of the drive creates more heat than almost all ships have the ability to absorb, but the larger the ship, the greater capacity for power generation, so larger power plants. It isn't a linear thing, it's a exponential scale for power generation. And cooling, same thing. Planet orbit boundary and Sol is around 79. This is something I went over a long time ago, but I think that they used the distance to the Oort cloud as the size for the Sol system. And so I don't know if that's what they use in terms of the size for the other systems, is like how far out is the Oort cloud? How many gigamomies in 1 AU? Yeah, and that's the thing, is I don't know if the gigameters in the game map correspond appropriately to what the AU sizes are on the map. So we'll see how that ends up working out. But it's all just numbers that they can move around. Or no, the Kuiper belt. Sorry, the Kuiper belt, not the Oort cloud. So the distance to the Kuiper belt. So the outer edge of the Kuiper belt is 50 AU, and it's 20 AU across. So, and then they have Sol listed as 51 AU in the star map. But who knows how that translates to the other systems. Where was I? So the larger the ship, the greater capacity for both power generation and cooling. So the heat doesn't build up as quickly as it would on the smaller ships. This is why when you come out of a quantum jump, your quantum drive has to cool down, because it builds up heat over time. But we don't have the way it works in game is we don't have the distances enough, and our quantum drives don't build up enough heat that it forces you to stop. It pulls you out of quantum. They want it so that way you might be able to have the range to make a jump across, a system in a smaller ship, but you'd have to do it in a series of jumps. You'd have to come out of quantum, let your ship cool down, and then make the next jump. Or turn off everything other than the quantum drive and reroute all your coolant to the quantum drive to be able to make a longer jump. But we'll read more about that here in a second. The larger the ship, the more space for power and cooling units. The Idris is a good example with its huge reactor room and its cooling bath. Because of this, it normally takes longer for a big ship to reach the point it must shut down the drive to allow it to cool down, which is why larger ships can quantum travel for a longer duration than a smaller ship that can't dedicate nearly as much space to power units and cooling. This is also the reason really small ships like a Merlin don't have a quantum drive at all. They just don't have the room for the minimum required power and cooling you need for a quantum drive. Now, so there's gonna get more detail here in a second. Now we could have just said size 1 quantum drives can jump for X time or distance, and a size 2 can do twice as much. If we had, I thought I would have read a bunch of posts comparing quantum drives to car or aircraft engines, how they don't overheat, so it's stupid that 900 years in the future quantum drives overheat. Although if you have a coolant leak, if you're driving across the Sahara, I think you'll find a car engine can overheat. But as I said at the top of this post, it is the wrong comparison to make. In the universe of Star Citizen, no one that humanity knows of has made a quantum drive that can operate indefinitely. A quantum drive allows you to cover great distances in a short period of time, but is only capable of operation for a limited amount of time before it needs to shut itself down and cool off. The reason why we made heat as well as quantum matter the driver of the quantum travel time distance is that it allows players to make choices in how they configure and set up their ships. Explorers would likely favor higher quality and larger cooling, as well as a strong power source for long distance quantum travel and jumps. So the idea is that not only would more coolant or more cooling ability allow you to stay in quantum travel longer, but you could also, with a larger power plant or a higher quality power plant, be able to generate more power to apply to your quantum drive to achieve a higher speed. Now you might you might be able to not jump as far, but you'd be able to make that jump faster. And it's your choice, where you want to, how much coolant you want to devote to your quantum drive and your power plant, in order to say, hey, I want to make a longer jump before I have to stop and cool down. Or I want to be able to make a less long jump, but be able to make that jump faster. Or I want to be able to shut down other things and divert all my coolant to my power plant, and my quantum drive in order to be able to go faster and travel longer. But then if I get pulled out of quantum, I get interdicted or whatever, I have, no power, no coolant, routed to my weapons, and that takes time to shift things over. That's where the engineering gameplay and having an engineer comes into play. Not required, but very helpful for being able to engage in this player agency to tune things how you want based off what you're doing. Are you trying to respond rapidly? Okay, well, divert more power, achieve higher speed, but you might, you got to make sure that you can achieve that jump before you have to stop and cool down, because then you might not get there in time to respond to that, that beacon, someone asking for help. Or it can very much affect your hauling and so on. Let's see. So, Explorer, but this would likely be at the expense of more powerful shields or weapons, which it then couldn't operate effectively. You wouldn't have enough power or enough coolant to divert to those things. The whole idea is you have to have the player make hard choices in what components to upgrade or equip. What is their priority? Combat, travel time or distance, protection? All things in the game are meant to have trade-offs. We don't want some meta ship or loadout that trumps everything else. You configure your ship for combat, but you can't quantum as far as your weapons and shield. You can't quantum as far as your weapons and shields are sucking down a bunch of power and cooling. If we didn't tie this to the power and heat, but instead of use some arbitrary time per drive, there wouldn't be as much ability for the player to affect things inside a holistic system where all the components of the ship matter. They simply would have to move up to a bigger ship item or ship to travel longer while in quantum. While the system we are implementing, you'll have a lot ability to tweak or alter things on the fly, depending on your objective. A pilot could divert a bunch of power and cooling away from other systems, like shields or weapons, to quantum further, but the downside is when coming out of quantum, they will be vulnerable until they can shift power back to the systems needed for combat. So if you're thinking about making those smaller jumps, that might be a choice, but then, you're at risk, and that will, make you choose what route you take. If we're talking about that route from Terra to Castra, you're looking at smaller jumps and a smaller, a series of smaller jumps to navigate those systems and go from jump point to jump point, versus you jump into Hadrian and then you've got one long jump and you might be able to max it out, but there could be obstacles within that jump. Things are going to pull you out of quantum. So there's a lot of stuff that goes into those choices. So this is much better gameplay as it gives players the opportunity to tweak and adjust on the fly. We built a systemic pipe and resource management system for ships. Engineering. This is back when it was the pipe system. This is a year before they started talking about engineering gameplay and the resource network. But they were already talking about it, but this is before we got that first demo with the hammerhead. And people and locations, We built a systemic pipe and resource management system for ships, people, and locations, just so people could make trade-offs in the resources dedicated to various components to achieve their current goal, or use this knowledge. The resource network will also be in locations. That's part of how Starchitect works. They've talked about that in relation to Starchitect and the locations it will build. To various components to achieve their current goal, or use this knowledge to cause havoc on an enemy ship or base. When far away from the nearest landing zone, you can't just equip a bigger or better quantum drive in your ship, but you could divert a lot more power and cooling to it to get that just a little extra distance. So you can also make the change and say, okay, I need to make this jump. If I do it at this stock configuration, what have you, I won't, it's not as efficient. I won't have enough fuel to make it. But if I choose if I divert less power to my quantum drive and I run it really cool, maybe it helps my fuel consumption go down. It'll take me longer to get there, but I can make it there on what I have left in the tank. So much more player agency, and it makes the distances, whether short or long, so much more meaningful when you have this gameplay, when we have dynamic server meshing, when we have Starchitect or Genesis planets with Starchitect locations, as well as a lot more points of interest, out in space and stuff. So that way we are engaging in the gameplay. That's, you're spending more time playing, whether your play is involved in quantum travel or not. This allows for people who are doing their whole sea hauling contracts, and such, or have resources for their org that they need to get from Stanton all the way to Nyx to have more gameplay during their travel. Denaceris, boo, what do you mean boo? Boo what? But this allows for gameplay and agency on how, is that hauling mission a timed contract? And okay, well, we're going to have to burn a lot of fuel and go fast and maybe apply some more wear and tear, but it'll be worth it. Right now, we don't have that. But, that applies to short jumps and longer jumps. But it has a lot more player agency and variety, for players doing hauling, as well as players who are doing stuff on the ground on planets, or short distances between POI around a planetary system. But yeah, so a lot of information to cover. It was a bit of a long spectrum pulse, but I hope you guys found it interesting. And this is just some of the stuff. There's more quotes that I've found and everything, but these are the ones that are more impactful in order to sort of paint that picture for what this is going to look like, in the next year, 2 years, 3 years, as we work our way towards 1.0, where this new flight model with the quantum travel experience comes online, where they're able to further iterate and further develop engineering. Oh, boo isn't scary. I thought your boo is in like, boo that. Hey, Naz, how you doing, buddy? Aren't you at work? Or are you home? But you can see how these things are coming into alignment with the development on server meshing, with the development on the flight model that we've been hearing about. Just 10 more years. Yeah. Not 10 more years. 3 to 5, but, definitely not 10. 10's silly. But how these things coalesce into an experience. But if you look at each one in isolation, you can't really appreciate the others that they make possible, that they enable. And people don't necessarily think about server meshing being related to quantum travel and new quantum travel experience and quantum boost. They don't think about how that relates to the presentations they've done on Genesis and Starchitect and Planet Tech V5. And in the future, they're going to have to talk about how they're going to do things similarly for space-based POI, for the systems that put the space stations and the asteroid facilities and the derelicts and such, and mining stations and what have you in a logical fashion, but have enough density where, again, you stay within a planetary system or you stay around an asteroid field for longer before moving on. But yeah, that's what I have for this Spectrum Pulse. Spectrum Pulse. I hope you guys enjoyed it. I hope we will share this information. If you come across other information that's relevant, I would love to hear about it. If you're watching this later on YouTube or the VOD on Twitch, would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below or drop in my Discord. The invite is always open, so we'd love to have you. But let's go ahead and change screens and we will close out the show. Again, I want to say thank you to for the raid from, oh gosh, what was their name? The Chaotic Seekers for the charity raid regarding Stack Up. Really appreciate it. Thank you guys all for being here. And again, always just want to remind everybody the exclamation point charity in chat if you'd like to make a donation to the cause. But hope some of those folks stuck around and learned something new. Talked about the org earlier this evening. If you are interested in joining me on my gameplay sessions, you are not required to. It is a casual org. We're just there to have fun and play in a light RP manner and just do things and live out in the black together. It's not required to join the org on the RSI website. If you just want to come and be a part of the gameplay sessions, you just join the Discord and go to the welcome channel for the org and get the role, and that way you can see the pings and the announcements for the events. Been having a lot of fun. Going to continue to do some more grinding of the Reco missions in order to get the missions to go to the Moraine stations, hopefully in the near future, but also probably going to mix it up this next, not as much this next week because I go out of town on Thursday for 4 or 5 days, but hopefully to get one more session in on Wednesday with the org before I leave. Maybe we'll do some of those scanning and mining missions and go out and do some mining. But want to get to those to the rep level in order to get those missions where you go fight the Moraine on their space stations and collect data and stuff, do some more looting. Because I really want to get that CQ7 blueprint. I want it bad. But yeah, so if that's something you're interested in, would love to see you. But stay tuned for the announcements for the next org event, which will probably be Wednesday. And then Monday night is my 0 to Hero evening. And so I'll be picking that back up. And again, these things start at 10 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Mountain Time, because that's where I live. And that's when my wife and kids usually go to bed. Yeah, loot, lots of loot. Oh man, we did so much looting last night. And we totally lucked out. It was so great. Like literally as I was starting the stream and we were getting together, it was just me and Prince of Dragon and Haru the Ninja. I was talking about, because I had outfitted the Carrying Crow, which is my Idris. I had loaded up 2 C8Xs for doing the sort of boarding missions and stuff, using them as shuttlecraft. But I also had my F7A Mark 1 and Mark 2 on board, and I had outfitted them with 2 energy repeaters, 2 distortions, the sucker punches, and I needed 2 more energy repeaters for each. I needed size 4s, so that way I could have 4 repeaters, for taking down shields, and then the sucker punches so they could fly sort of as a wingman pair for disabling ships. Been having a lot of fun doing that with combat missions where we do the combat, we take down the ship, and then we scrap it, we scavenge it. Take the components, take the weapons, and then take the scrape the hull. And it's a really fun way to go about mixing in some combat with like almost the entire full salvage loop, as well as getting some good components depending on the mission and what loot they drop or what they're equipped with. But I was talking about, man, I need to do like some more hammerhead scavenging or some way where I can get some rhinos, so I can get 4 more rhinos for my ships. And on the first mission that we did for Reco, we went out and we did the ship in distress and the boarded caterpillar, and we got to loot the components out of the pirate cutlass and a whole bunch of weapons and other stuff. But then on our way back, we're flying in the C8X, and on our way back to the Idris, we literally just fly past a I think it was a back half of a hammerhead with 3 or 4 of the turrets on it, I think. Yeah, I think there's 3 turrets on it, or maybe it was more. Just lying there. No idea if it was I think it was an NPC one, but why would it be there? Did it spawn from another mission that was there and it just got left? Why did it not despawn? I don't know. But when we, tractor beamed the weapons, it didn't show, attributed to another player. They weren't bricked or anything. And so we just, pulled them onto I've dropped off one of the guys so it wouldn't hopefully it wouldn't despawn. And then Prince had his fighter there as well. And so I flew back to the Idris. I landed on the Idris and I brought it back over and we pulled off all the guns. We did an underway refit on both the Hornets and put the Rhinos on them. So they're running 4 energy repeaters and 2 distortions, the sucker punches on each. And then we moved the Rhinos are too big to fit on the cargo grids in the hangar. And we learned the hard way, a lot of times when you quantum travel, they'll just disappear if they're not on a grid. And so we were able to throw them up the elevator shaft and put them on the cargo grid for the main cargo bay on the second deck of the Idris. And then at the end of the session, we took them back, and that, along with the components we looted, we unloaded it all and sent it down the freight elevator. And when I get a chance, I'm gonna scrap the components that we didn't want in those weapons, and then sell the materials. And because we were doing that with hammerheads, so the hammerhead salvage contracts, and you sell those materials and you get good money out of it. And so I'm probably sitting, on a couple hundred UEC in just those weapons and components that we weren't going to use anyway, for when I scrap and sell those things, on top of the money we made doing missions, as well as getting a crap ton of loot. Like, we literally stuffed all the armories, the entire armory on the Idris full of guns, as well as having a ton of armor and more guns and more ammo we know what to do with, in containers, in the hangar, ready for people to use. So we're all outfitted and ready to go do missions, and regardless of what type. So looking forward to doing more of that. But yeah, that's all I have for this evening. I really appreciate you guys coming and joining me. And we got rated, so we definitely need to pay it forward and send some love to someone. So let's go find someone to raid on Twitch. And that way I can get to bed and get a good night's sleep, because the twins are feeling better, but now my 4.5-year-old has the cold and he was miserable today. So we are not out of the woods. Let's see. Levangie Fan is playing. Yeah, Northern Trooper, you know what I'm talking about. It doesn't look like 5 Star is playing. Yeah, they're just the continuous stream, watching ISCs. So same category. We want same category, and I think the only one I'm following is Levangie Fan. Any suggestions on who I should raid? I've raided Levangie Fan several times, so I try to... Oh, wait. Oh, they're in... Oh, shit. What just happened? What just happened? Something just happened. Oh, somebody just gifted some subs. Where? Oh, I gotta look at the Twitch chat. Hold on, that's why. Oh, shit. Mount Stunner just gifted to all live followers on Twitch 13 subs. Dude, you are a freaking legend. Thank you so much for the support, Mount Stunner. Thank you for gifting those subs to all those lucky folks who are live. Really appreciate it. And we're getting raided. Ah, Jesus Christ. What is going on? Hey, Saris LP with the raid with 34 people coming over. Thank you so much.
Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship.
No sleep till Brooklyn.
Part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the
Oh,
ship.
jeez.
Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Oh, no. Not doing a 24-hour stream with sick kids.
Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the
Part
ship.
of the ship.
Part of the crew, part of the
Part of the
ship.
ship.
Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Hold on, we got to get a shout out in for...
Part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship.
Shout out for
Part of the
Sirius.
crew, part of the ship.
Panic.
Part of the crew,
That's right.
part of
Oh,
the ship.
let's see if I can...
Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew, part of the ship. Part of the crew,
Oh,
part of
man.
the ship. Part of the crew, part of 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 the ship.
All right, did that... That pause it? My alerts. Okay, cool. It did work. Okay. All right. Okay, so let me catch up with chat. Sorry. So Sirius, thank you so much for the raid. Really appreciate you bringing your people over here. I was literally just wrapping up the Pathfinders podcast though. Oh, you were fundraising for Stack Up too. Or what were you? Let's see. What does it say you were? You're just chatting. Oh, okay, cool. What sort of content do you do, Sirius? I'm a bad person. I didn't even realize like there's some. I ended with just chatting, but I was playing The Sims 4. Oh, cool, loads of fun. Yeah, the just chatting. Yeah, so my name is Trio311. I'm a former infantry marine and current Army National Guard flight paramedic, which is why I'm such a big supporter of StackUp.org. On screen celebrate. Hey, thanks so much for that, Mount Center. But I am the producer and host of a Jambit Play. She's a cozy gamer that does Sims, farming, Warframe, Fortnite, and a ton of other games. Oh, cool. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for the support and bringing your community over here. I really appreciate it. I am sorry that I was just about to call it a night. It's almost 11 o'clock my time, and I'm a space dad. I'm a dad gamer, and I have 2-year-old twins who just got over a cold, and now my 4-year-old has it, and he was miserable today. So I was about to call it a night and find someone else to raid. So if Sirius, I don't know if you have. How did you? Let's keep it going. How did you find? Did you just search for somebody? Yeah, I'm literally a real space dad. Did you just search for somebody? How did you search for people charity streaming for Stack Up? Looked at the tag. Okay, through the Stack Up tag. Okay, let's do that. We'll find another Stack Up person to raid and pass the level along and keep it going because gotta love Stack Up. But yeah, someone said they love my enterprise. So wait, before where was that? Yeah, gotta love the cause. Yeah, that's the Enterprise D, the Lego, and the I don't have the box out. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of the light kit. It was a bear to put together, but it's worth it. And it comes with a 4 AAA battery pack that has a. Those who stayed with the raid, we would appreciate if you can hang out with one more stop on the raid train. A suggestion: they are actively running the donation. Who's that? Oh, Skull Candy Eater. Okay, cool. We will do that. If you're interested in light kits, though, I'm sorry, I can't remember the name, but it was once I got everything put together, it was hard, but it's worth it, and it looks really great. And it's got a little remote, so I can change. I can make it so that way, like these flash. I can make it so that way they like have slow, fast strobe, slow strobe. It's got the spinning light back there. light here for the where the shuttle is. There's a little shuttle here coming in. It's really cool. I really love it. But I got a USB extension cord and I ran that to my power strip over here that runs all my lights. And so it's all connected to Alexa, and so I can tell Alexa out in the living room, turn on my office lights, and it all goes beer. Oh yeah, I'm a big sci-fi fan, and so I've got, I'm waiting to see what the next Star Trek Lego is going to be. But that'll be up on the top shelf, I think. And then I've got an R2D2 that I need to build. I've got BB-8, I've got Chopper, and then I've also got the Mandalorian helmet up there that I need to build. You can't see it. Then I've got a bunch of ship models over there. I've got a Seleco, the Rocinante, Firefly, UNSC Infinity, Battlestar Galactica, a Roger Young. I've got the mothership from Halo, Homeworld 3 that lights up and makes sounds with this little fleet. Yeah. Okay, so let's go ahead and find. It didn't send you the charity. Really? Hold on. Charity. Oh, that's weird. Okay. Huh. Hold on. Hold on. Let me fix this. It's was it view my Twitch? How did that get broken? Oh man, thank you so much for pointing that out. Huh. Okay. Campaigns. All the arms. Campaign link. Okay. Let's see what that looks like when I drop it in chat. Okay, so there's the new campaign link. Thank you so much for... Oh, hey, taught me pickles. Wait, what person? Oh, you're saying Skull Candy Eater. Okay, so Skull Candy Eater is the person that's $100 from their goal. They're the ones running the donation link. Right? Do I have that right? Okay. As soon as we get off here, I will make sure I change that to the bot. And let's find Skull. Okay, so Skull. And then, Skull Candy Eater. They're the Outlast trials. I have no idea what that is, but cool. Okay. I'm going to start the raid now. And again, thank you so much for the raid, Sirius. Thank you so much for dropping those gift subs, Mount Stunner. Really appreciate it. And thanks for the heads up on the Tiltify link. Well, that's, I wonder how that happened. Thank you so much. But yeah, we're going to call it a night because I got to get some rest so I can go be a space dad tomorrow. Love all you guys, and hope you'll come back and check it out again, the podcast again soon. I'll be playing Star Citizen again on Monday night, doing Zero to Hero, doing org stuff, raid messages. I haven't clicked the thing yet, but yeah, let's go ahead and get it started. Okay. All right, and number go up. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 07s. Cheers, everybody. Have a good night. Goodbye.